I'm really honored to help close out the state marketing workshop. I'm especially excited to talk to you about this topic. It fits so nicely into the work that you've all been doing and the work we've been talking about here for the last 3 days. To tell you a little bit more before I get right into it, please welcome from Fishbrain, who gave me this hat. It is Lisa Kennelly. Let me cue her up here right now.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kennelly from Fishbrain, and we are pleased to be the presenting sponsor of this year's State Marketing Workshop. You've been seeing him all week, but I would like to again introduce Jay Baer, Hall of Fame keynote speaker and founder and president of Convince and Convert. Jay will provide you with the recipe for creating a coveted customer experience. You will learn why customer experience is the fastest path to growth and why the pandemic has made it more important than ever. And you will create specific concrete plans that you can immediately put into place that will help boost the 3 R's in your region. Enjoy.
Hold them like they do in Texas.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you to Fishbrain. As you suspect, I used to do this a lot live. Some of you saw me present live at previous state marketing workshops in years past, and I used to travel like 200 days a year. I traveled basically 200 days a year every year for the last 16 years until 2020, of course. And consequently, I used to be in hotels all the time, and I'd go to Vegas a lot. Because of course Vegas is a pretty common conference destination. I actually grew up not too far from there. I grew up in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. So Vegas was my home airport, the city I would spend most time in when I was a kid. So I've been to Vegas lots and lots and lots of times. But in 2019, pre-pandemic, obviously, I was there for a conference, and I got in late the night before from a different event in Florida somewhere. And I got in late, and so I just kind of threw my stuff on the bed and crashed, and woke up the next morning early to do the sound check. So you have to, make sure the microphone works and check your slides and all that jazz. So it's in some fancy casino hotel. It doesn't really matter which one. I wake up and I go to the bathroom, and I'm all kind of bleary-eyed because it's time change and I don't even know what's going on. And I open the shower door and I kind of peer in there, and it turns out that there are no fewer than 12, I'm not making this up, no fewer than 12 dials and switches and sliders and knobs, things to manipulate. And I kind of looked around and I fiddled and I fuddled and I twiddled and I twaddled and I slid and I scratched. And as God is my witness, I, Jay Baer, Hall of Fame keynote speaker, could not figure out how to turn on the shower. I had to make one of the most embarrassing, probably is the most embarrassing phone call of my entire career, have to call the front desk naked and say, I'm sorry, I can't turn on my shower. But I will never forget it, because the very nice woman who answered the phone says, oh, that's okay, Mr. Baer. We get several of these calls a day. To which I thought, if that's the case, you need a sign or a sticker or some kind of instructions at check-in, because if you're taking the same phone call over and over and over, you are not addressing the problem. You are just addressing symptoms. Now, did I expect to be able to wash myself in a fancy hotel without telephonic assistance? I did. And you would too. But I was not able to actually do that. Therefore, this hotel did not meet my expectations. And because of that, it created a poor customer experience. Now, this is important because you see, customer experience, angler experience, if you will, is never inherently or objectively positive or negative. It is always circumstantial. Every customer experience is based on the expectation equation. And as Stephanie mentioned in the chat a moment ago, thank you, Stephanie, you would be better off going into speaker view at this point because you'll see the slides and my video in the same place as opposed to sharing screen. It'll just be a better experience for you. The expectation is this. Customer experience is the difference between what customers think will happen and what actually occurs. See, every angler you have, new, reactivated, long-standing, every angler you will ever recruit, same thing with boaters, they all have expectations for how everything with every trip will go, whether it's buying a license or going out with your friends. You do the same thing. We have expectations about everything. You have expectations about how this state marketing workshop will go. You have expectations for how this presentation will go. You have expectations for how dinner will go tonight. We can't help it. It's how we are wired as human beings. We all carry these expectations around with us all the time, like in an invisible fanny pack. So if you can exceed those expectations, that's where a great customer experience lives. And when you fall short of those expectations, that's where you get a negative customer experience. It's not inherently positive or negative. It's always based on the expectations. And what we have discovered is that customer experience is actually more important now than probably at any point since the Industrial Revolution, when a negative customer experience could probably kill you. Right now, whichever organization can provide the best customer experience will win, and those who fail to meet customer expectations will lose. 82% of consumers say that the experience is as important as the product or service, or in your case, activity itself. And for you, the question is, which leisure activity can provide the best customer experience? Because indeed, of course, we've talked about it all week, fishing has millions, literally millions of new participants, and we're almost there to 60 and 60. But some of that, admittedly, is because of COVID. And as we heard about on day one from Ipsos, we have to make sure that we lock in those gains. Because as the virus abates, your competitors, it won't just be camping and golf. It will be everything. All the leisure time that you have stolen back over the last year, those organizations, their version of the RBFF is not sitting around saying, well, I guess we lost, fishing wins. They're having events that say, how do we get all these people who started to fish to stop doing that? In a world where the average Netflix user watches 21 hours per week and has literally thousands of choices one click away, it's not going to take a lot of hassle for new anglers to say, yeah, that was fun, but I fished during the pandemic, but I'm not going to do that anymore because it's too much work. I don't catch any fish. I just don't want to do that anymore. And I know that the data suggests that 90% of new anglers plan to keep fishing. We talked about that with Ipsos. But I would suggest, as somebody who does a lot of research, that data carries quite a bit of recency bias. If you asked people on their wedding day, what percentage plan to stay married, it would be at least 90%. But life then takes over. And in fact, during the pandemic, while fishing skyrocketed, divorces were up 34%. Correlation? I can't say, but those are the facts. Now, soon enough, all of these new anglers, they're not going to turn to fishing as a default COVID-friendly outdoors activity, but will instead do the mental calculus. They will evaluate fishing, as will I, versus all the other ways they can spend their time. So especially for the new and the lapsed anglers that you've reactivated and returned to the sport, everything about fishing, all of it, man, the gear, the expense, the location, the people, the weather, all of it needs to be more awesome. Needs to be more awesome. And that is your job. I am literally one of the people you need to convince. Angie in Indiana, most specifically. I live in Bloomington, Indiana. I have a house on Lake Lemon, not too far from town here, about 20 minutes from here. I have a tri-tune that I've had for 4 years. This will be my 5th summer. So I think technically in the research, I'm an established boater. But I have hardly ever held a fishing rod, like literally in my entire life, until the pandemic. When, as I said, I went from traveling 200 days a year to literally 0 days a year. I have not left the county in 50 weeks. My friends and I now fish every Wednesday evening, or we did until the lake froze over. We call it Bite Night. Bite Night. We even have a logo. One of my friends is a graphic designer. We even have a logo, Bite Night, Lake Lemon 2020. We mostly fish for crappie, but we'll occasionally catch a bass on accident. This is greatest hits for Bite Night. And we all have nicknames because, of course, my nickname is unfortunately Trees, because that's where my casts often end up. I was very sympathetic to Erica, the awkward angler who joined us earlier today, and her pictures of fly fishing. I won't even attempt fly fishing. I can't even spin cast accurately or safely. And the question I ask myself all the time, and it's really a microcosm of your entire challenge as an industry. And I think the reason why we're here and why this year's state marketing workshop, in my estimation, is perhaps the most important one you will ever have. The question I ask myself is quite simple. I love those guys. They're my best friends. And we had such an amazing time every Wednesday night. Somebody brings dinner, bunch of beers, hang out, try to catch crappie. It's a beautiful lake. It's fantastic. But my question is, will Bite Night survive the vaccine? That's the question. Will Bite Night survive the vaccine? Because once vacations and basketball games and live music are back on the menu, will we still fish every Wednesday night? And I honestly don't know. I just don't know. I hope so, but I just don't know. And if you're going to make this growth in fishing anything other than a blip on the historical radar, if you're going to turn 2021 into 2021 in your state, you can't just be good at customer experience. You can't just be better than last year at customer experience. You have to be so good that the other leisure activities can't take back people like me. I have a name for that level of customer experience, the level that you're going to need to reach this year. It's called the Coveted Customer Experience. The Coveted Customer Experience is when you exceed expectations so much that price and perfection are not required. You exceed expectations so much that price and perfection are not required. If it costs some money to get a license and buy gear, etc., it's okay. And if it's not a perfect trip, that's also okay. When you can deliver the coveted customer experience, it builds a wellspring of support that you can draw on when necessary. What the coveted customer experience actually buys you, what it buys fishing in your state, is something that's really important in business and marketing and communications, but we don't talk about it very much. What it buys you in truth is the benefit of the doubt and a second chance. And this is important because, as we talked about yesterday, it's called fishing, not catching. All anglers, especially new or returning fishermen, are going to have bad days. For example, true fact, friends, I got a personal record 43 mosquito bites in one night. 43 bites in one night on Bite Night. when I forgot to put on spray, and I'm that guy that the mosquitoes love. We went way upriver, and that was a mistake for this guy right here. 43 mosquito bites in a night. But I liked fishing enough that I came back the next week. I mostly just scratched. I didn't really fish, but I came back. So the question is, yeah, it does. Bite night is really accurately named. How can you create the coveted customer experience in your own state? Well, first, I think it's by understanding that how we go about improving customer experience is actually really flawed. 70% of customer experience initiatives in organizations fail to produce return on investment. It's the opposite of the colossal success that Amber had in Pennsylvania. How can that be true? How can 7 out of 10 efforts to get better at customer experience not return positive results? Well, it's because we think of customer experience wrong. See, it's not one thing. When I say customer experience, that doesn't actually exist. Customer experience is how we make anglers feel, and those feelings are driven by the expectations. And what dictates those expectations and the outcomes are dozens or maybe even hundreds of different decisions that you make in your organization each and every day. And some are not in your control. Whether the fish are biting is not up to you necessarily. But when you combine all those things together, it's dozens or hundreds of things that dictate the experience. It's the knowledge, it's the gear, it's the license, it's the company, it's the weather, it's the results, all of it. You can't just make all of that better. Customer experience doesn't exist. It's just a nickname that we've decided to use together in business and in organizations to represent all of these things that you can possibly execute on. So when you think about customer experience holistically and try and move the needle, what do you do with that, right? Let me give you a metaphor. You ever get one of those giant party subs or grinders or heroes or hoagies, whatever you call it in your region, and they bring it on like a 6 or 8 foot board, like a 2x4, right? You know what I'm talking about? The only way that you can eat this sandwich is that whomever made the sandwich helpfully cut it into 4-inch slices. That's the only way. If they didn't cut it, you can't eat it. It's not like you're going to get Dave on one end and Frank on the other, and they're going to like eat it together like Lady and the Tramp style, right? Each get on the end and go like that. It won't work. Although I'd pay to see it, but it won't work. The biggest way that you can fail with customer experience is ironically to think big. Instead, I want you to think small. To think small, to create the coveted customer experience and focus on not everything because that's impossible, to focus on 3 things that anglers care about, 3 things that will keep them coming back, 3 things. And they want you to be quick. They want you to be clear, and they want you to be kind. Quick, clear, and kind. Let's look at each of these. The thing about quick is I have now been in this business in digital marketing since 1993. And one thing I've discovered is that speed expectations amongst consumers never, ever go backwards. Never. Nobody ever says, I've been thinking. And it's okay if you all do that a little bit more slowly. Nobody ever says that. What was fast 3 years ago is commonplace today. And on and on and on and on. It's actually remarkable how much faster many of you have gotten in your states, even since the last time I had a chance to work with you in this event. Speed expectations never go backwards. They don't even stand still. And you might think that customers and anglers, boaters are okay with being a little slower because of COVID, but it turns out that's not true. There is no pandemic pass. In fact, new research says that 86% of customers expect businesses to be more responsive since the pandemic. More responsive, which is why it always breaks my heart when I go to buy something online and I see the little pull down that says, because of COVID, it's gonna take us, 14 weeks to get your sweater. And I'm like, man, it's been a year. Like, get your supply chain sorted out. People they don't tolerate that excuse anymore. Now, some organizations fail miserably at speed. One of my favorite examples, I've shown this one to Joanne in the past. This is an actual tweet. This is real. Amanda says, guys, I'm trapped in an Amtrak elevator at BWI Airport. Help. BWI is Baltimore for many of you. Help. This is a distress tweet. Yes, we're all on the same page there. 205 days pass, and Amtrak responds. We're sorry to hear that. Are you still in the elevator? Like, I certainly hope not, because now we have more of a janitorial problem, more so than a safety problem. That's not fast enough. I think we can all agree to that. I guess she was able to MacGyver herself to safety and survive this ordeal. Amtrak felt pretty bad about it, gave her a free train trip. So I guess all is well that ends well. That's not fast enough. That's not going to exceed expectations. That is not a coveted customer experience, of course. The thing about speed, and having been a consultant for so long and worked with hundreds and hundreds of companies and organizations, the thing about speed is it doesn't require really any magic. It just requires want to. It requires desire and some operational engineering. And even organizations that you wouldn't think would be very fast can be fast if they really want to. This is Bogdanoff and Dodges. They're an accounting firm in Indianapolis, not too far from me. They're a small accounting firm. They do personal returns, small business returns. They are indistinguishable, frankly, from 10,000 other accounting firms in this country. They do the same stuff for the same price, but Bogdanoff and Dodges understand how important quick is to the coveted customer experience. They respond to every client at all times within 5 minutes. 5-minute response time from an accounting firm. You've probably never seen that, nor has anyone else. How do I know this? They have like 70 Google reviews for an accounting firm. And 60 of those 70, and I know because I counted them, mention specifically how fast they are because it exceeds the expectations of those clients. When was the last time you even considered leaving a review for an accounting firm? What is the review? I got my taxes back. Check it out. All the numbers added up. 3 stars. Like, people just don't do that. They have exceeded expectations just by being faster. And the Phishing Licenses Secret Shopper study that we learned about found that 78% of states require 6 or more pages on the website to buy a license. 6 or more pages, friends. Uber Eats, I can get a burrito in 2 pages. I drive a Volvo now, partially because they have this program called Care by Volvo, which is a lease. It's 2 clicks. I want this car. Here's my social security number, and the car shows up. Taxes are included. Insurance is included. Maintenance is included. 2 clicks, a car shows up at my house. Not an Uber car delivery, like take me somewhere, an actual car. 2 clicks. 6 clicks is not going to get it done. We actually touched on this yesterday a little bit humorously, but it's not a joke. The technology exists today, right now. My company can build it for you right now that says, Alexa, get me a phishing license. We've got to focus harder in every state on how to remove every speed obstacle wherever they exist. And one of these is making sure that everything you do is mobile first. You know what people don't bring on phishing trips? And I can speak from experience: laptops. Very rarely do you see a laptop on a phishing trip. So you have to design all of your interfaces for a phone first, and then you add some extra ornaments on the Christmas tree for the desktop. But almost all web designers do it the other way around. They build a site for desktop and they take features away for mobile. And that's not going to work much longer. Just not. Also, we've got to adapt tactics that customers believe are faster, like text messaging. Now, I know the Ipsos research found that email and social are the most popular places to get information about phishing, and that stands to reason. I'll talk more about it in a second. But I would also encourage you this year, if you haven't, to lean into text messaging and web chat as well. In fact, 75% increase in 2020 alone in customers interested in using text for customer service purposes. That research just came out a month or so ago from Zendesk. Historically, as you probably know, text messaging has been more of a personal communication device, and now it's becoming much more of a consumer to organization or business to consumer communication modality. So think about text and web chat and emphasizing that a little bit more in the year to come. And also, we talked about how critical it is that it's all these young anglers, right? Whether they're minors or not, they're youthful. And you know who doesn't want to communicate with you via email? Anybody who's under 18. Really, anybody who's under 24, technically. Essentially, anybody who's in Gen Z. I have two of them. My daughter's 22 now. My son's 19. The one thing they have categorically no interest in at all is the telephone. My son won't talk on the phone at bayonet point. Not interested. His car was broken this week. I'm like, okay, he has an apartment. I'm like, okay, look, you have your own place, you have your own car, call and get it fixed. He would almost rather have a broken car than have to make a phone call. It's that bad. And the other thing they don't want to do is email. So I understand that historically, most of our communication with anglers has been via email and phone, and that's great. But I'm telling you, you've got to get ahead of this curve. You can't wait for the anglers to be that age group and then say, man, we got to stop relying on email so much. We got to get ahead of that game, like now. So my question for you is this. Within the next 90 days, how can you in your state be 15% faster? I'm not asking you to leap over a mountain. How can you be 15% faster? All of you can do that. You just have to want to and figure out a plan to make it happen. Now let's talk about Clear. There are so many new anglers, which obviously is fantastic. It's like a windfall. But the problem with first-time customers of anything is they don't know nothing about nothing. By definition, they know nothing about nothing. And the less they know, the more likely they are to get frustrated and to stop fishing. You just have to educate more than you ever have because the composition of your total audience is changing. You have to close what I call the uncertainty gap. The uncertainty gap is the distance between what you know about your organization, about fishing, and what the anglers know. And one of the things that is an ipso facto relationship is that as more new people fish, the uncertainty gap gets bigger, not smaller. It gets bigger. I would argue that if you did research of all of your anglers, random sample of anglers, including the new ones, anglers know less about fishing today in your state than they ever have in history. Less about fishing because there's so many new people who know almost nothing about fishing. And I'm going to go ahead and raise my hand and include myself in that group. What's also interesting is that demographically, increasingly, consumers want to self-educate. It's the same demographic that doesn't want to talk on the phone, but an even larger group of people. They don't necessarily want to have somebody teach them. They want to learn it themselves. And like literally in 6 weeks, okay, I went from not knowing how to spell crappie, which it is kind of confusing, right, to literally spending hours watching this guy.
Well, good morning, folks. It's Richard Jean, the fishing machine here. Look here. Let's get into exactly what's going on right here because this is another thing I've been wanting to show y'all about crappie.
Richard Gene, the fishing machine from the great state of Alabama, is my crappie sensei. I have spent way too many hours on YouTube learning from Richard. And I don't need somebody to teach me. I don't have time, but I've got time in the off hours since I want to self-educate. According to the Ipsos research that we looked at previously, new anglers say they want to know different ways to fish, what types of bait they need, where to fish, equipment, and types of fish available near them, among other topics. And so you've got to answer all of those questions, not just some of them, but all of them. So what you actually need is what I like to call the ultimate FAQ. The ultimate FAQ. Answer all the questions, not just a few. So let me tell you a story about my friend Joe. Joe's a realtor in Tallahassee, Florida. I know we got some Tallahasseeites with us here. Joe is an interesting realtor for two reasons. One, he only represents sellers. You want to buy a house, he doesn't really do that. He also only represents sellers who have homes between about $250,000 and $450,000, somewhere in that ballpark. Now, it's common in that market segment, as you may know, that people may not have a tremendous amount of upside equity in that home. So people think, well, I could work with a realtor, or I could sell this home myself. And if I can sell it myself, I don't have to pay the 6% real estate commission. What a lot of realtors do is they try to tell people, well, you can't sell a house on your own. I'm an expert. I'm a realtor. I'm a professional. Don't try it yourself. Joe does the exact opposite. He sat down and wrote a 63-page, totally free, downloadable PDF on his website called How to Sell a Home on Your Own in Florida. And it's exactly that, step by step, who to call, paperwork to fill out, what to do. I interviewed him for a book I wrote once, and I said, Joe, I don't really get this, man, because it seems to me like you're telling people exactly what they need to not hire you. Jay, I understand why you think that. But what you don't understand is that people get to about page 7 and they say, holy cow, is it hard to sell a house on my own? What was I thinking? It's his number one source of new customers. And it works because he puts everything in one place. It's not an infographic about how to sell a home on your own in Florida. It is everything. It's 63 pages long. Now, many of you have comprehensive resources about how to fish, but it's not the whole story. And you may not have comprehensive resources about the other parts of the story. For example, how many of you have an FAQ or a content initiative around fishing and wellness, the kind of things that Dr. Stu talked about so powerfully yesterday? There's always more questions to answer. Every question that's unanswered is a question that needs to be answered. Look, I love what New Jersey put together with their series of Ice Fishing 101 webinars. Love that. Great job. Nice way to reach out to people, get them fishing in a different way. It's something that I want to learn how to do someday, ice fishing myself. But it's also important to realize that anglers aren't likely to head over to their state game and fish website when they've got a fishing question. Not in a world where Google and YouTube exist. The chances of you being in their first 5 places they look for information is almost 0%. So you've got to push out your information to the places where the anglers are already spending time. According to the Ipsos research, that's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. You can see the chart there, and the research goes into more detail that you should look at. According to Ipsos, the top 3 are Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Now, as a person who literally owns one of the world's leading social media strategy firms, I will tell you that if I were you, I would prioritize YouTube by far the most, because that's the place that people go to get questions answered. Facebook and Instagram can work too, especially for things like license campaigns and the kind of stuff that Amber talked about earlier today. But in terms of overall, I want to educate myself, YouTube is the place that people are going to go. Here's a terrific example from our friends in Vermont.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fish ID station today. My name is Lee Samard, and I'm a fisheries biologist with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. Today, I'll be going through some of the commonly caught species that you might encounter while going out ice fishing here in Vermont.
What I like best about this, in addition to it being on YouTube, and nice job, Lee, is that this video is specific. It's not about Fish ID. It's about Fish ID when ice fishing in Vermont. This is a key point. The most important element when educating consumers, when trying to be clear and develop that coveted customer experience, is relevancy. Relevancy is the true killer app. Every single one of us on this meeting tell ourselves the same lie. All of us tell ourselves the same lie. We can't help it. It's the marketer's dilemma. The lie we tell ourselves is this: our target audience, new anglers, returning anglers, boaters, sportsmen of all types, our audience, they're just too busy. They have too many things going on. They're too busy to come to the webinar. They're too busy to watch the video. They're too busy to read the website. They're too busy to listen to the podcast. And that is absolutely categorically not true. It's not about being too busy. Everybody has time. People spend 21 hours a week watching Netflix. We have the time. If somebody tells you they're too busy, what's really going on, and the lie you're telling yourself, what's really going on is that the information you have presented to them is not relevant enough. It's not that they don't have the time. It's that they've decided that it's not worth their time. And that's an enormous difference. And the way you make it worth their time is by making it just for them. Consumers, especially those who are uncertain about fishing, they want information that feels like it was made just for them. It's not enough for you to create one guide to ice fishing. You need to make one for seniors and one for kids and one for urban fishing opportunities and one for Latinos. This is why your hyper-local retailers in your states continue to prosper, even when competing against Bass Pro and Amazon and Dick's, because they know the water, they know the bait, they know it all, and they tailor their recommendations to whomever is standing in front of them. And you've got to do the same thing with information. Specificity is interpreted as caring. If you give me information that's tailored to exactly what I want, I interpret that as you care about me more. Jennifer Wiz touched on this yesterday in her great presentation about how to segment your communication to match the experience of the angler or the life of the angler. As David said this morning, if I don't see me, you won't see me. And if they think you care, they will consume your content. If they consume your content, you will be well on the way to delivering that all-important coveted customer experience. So within the next 90 days, how can you be 15% more clear or 15% less confusing, if you prefer? Let's wrap it up. Take a look at kind. Kind. You know, I would tell you this. It's interesting. I'm a seventh generation entrepreneur. My son is an eighth generation entrepreneur. And I got to tell you, even though my family's been self-employed since the 1800s, the number of conversations I had with my dad or my grandfather about treating customers, in your case, anglers, with respect and kindness and dignity and humanity, 0 times. Never once in my entire life. Why? It was never a conversation that needed to occur. Many of us here are old enough to remember a time when treating customers that way was the default setting. But somewhere along the way, we kind of lost our way. And now we find ourselves in a place where we're sort of in an era of empathy deficit. Empathy deficit in business, in life, certainly in politics. Treating one another with kindness and respect and dignity and humanity is no longer the default setting. And that makes me a little sad. But I will tell you, it is a huge opportunity for your agencies, because now when you treat somebody with kindness that exceeds their expectation, they notice it. They feel that coveted customer experience. Now, let's just make sure we're on the same page here. When I say empathy, that doesn't mean the angler is always right. Anybody who says the customer is always right doesn't actually know what's happening in an organization. What empathy means is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, to understand and share the feelings of another person. Now, I had this happen to me in a very powerful way 2 years ago. I was going to Australia for a presentation, and my wife got to come with me, which was great. And we were connecting in Los Angeles, and the gate agent scanned my boarding pass and looked in that little weird black box they have there at the gate. and I think saw that I have lots of frequent flyer miles and said, "Oh, Mr. Baer, thank you for your loyalty. We appreciate your diamond status here on Delta. Enjoy your flight." And that was nice to hear, but I flew so much in those days, I'd heard that a number of times. It didn't exceed my expectations, so it wasn't a coveted customer experience. But then she scanned my wife's boarding pass and peered into that magic box and discovered that she has very few frequent flyer miles at all. Oh, no. Oh, Mrs. Baer. Mrs. Baer, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for what you must do at home so that Mr. Baer can spend so much time with us here at Delta. Ma'am, thank you. And I especially want to hope that you have a fantastic flight. And we went down that jetway in tears because she absolutely nailed our dynamic and how there is no me traveling around giving speeches without Allison. And now, because they've delivered that coveted customer experience, they have the benefit of the doubt with me. If they're not the least expensive ticket, I don't care. And if they make a mistake, which they will, it's an airline, I will give them another chance. And that's not about software, friends. That's not about process. That's about understanding expectations and allowing your team, especially people in the field, to treat anglers, especially the new anglers, with real empathy. So within 90 days, how can you be 15% more kind? Quick, clear, and kind. Those are the things that your anglers truly care about. But talking about customer experience is just that. It's just talk. I've never had somebody disagree. As long as I've been working on these themes, no one's ever said, "Jay, I disagree. I don't think experience is important. It doesn't matter to the success of our organization." But hear me when I say this. To actually create a coveted customer experience, you have to stop, start, or change actual behaviors in your agency. You have to stop, start, or change some things. Otherwise, all this is a kumbaya campfire nod and smile. And that's not going to make you any better. What I want you to do, I've asked you to think small. Now I want you to think smaller and design your 9. Design your 9. I want you to come up with 3 things, specific things that you're going to stop, start, or change to be 15% faster, to be 15% more clear, and 15% more kind in the next 90 days. 3, 3, 3, design your 9. For example, one of your 9 on clear might be to use more influencers and amplifying your messages. We saw examples in that from Jay Wiz in Tennessee. Also, Kelsey at Brant talked about influencers as well. One of your 9 on clear might also be to create more user-generated content, to get anglers creating more content about fishing. That's why I love the West Virginia Gold Rush t-shirt program we learned about. If you catch one of those magic fish and you get a t-shirt, you are almost certainly going to create social media about it. And I could do a whole presentation on how important it is to get real people talking about fishing in social media more so than social media from you. I absolutely believe that this can be your best ever. That 2020 won't just be a virus-related twist of fate. I believe that all these new anglers, like myself, can remain active and enthusiastic participants. But I also believe that this isn't the time for congratulations. This is not the time to think that we've got it made. Instead, this is the time to get better, to make the experience of fishing and boating not just better than last year, but better than it's ever been. Now is the time to sand off all of the rough edges, and they still exist, you know that, and make fishing and boating not just awesome, but also easy. Thinking about customer experience holistically is a recipe for failure. You've got to think more specifically and focus on the 3 things they actually care about. They want you to be quick, they want you to be clear, and they want you to be kind. Thanks so much. Fantastic to be with you. I appreciate it. I've got a little written guide on some of these policies. If you send a text message, just send the word Jay Baer. That's me to 66866. that will bounce back, and you will get the guide for your own use. Just text Jay Baer to 66866. I'll have KP put that in the chat as well.